This week in Imitation Nation, we have our first guest, Stephan von Schilcher from NovaVision. He's going to talk to us about a lifetime in brand protection, how it's really the family business, and what he's learned in the recent years about pallet security and new techniques for stealing and counterfeits. Coming up. Stephan, welcome to the Imitation Nation podcast.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Well, you are the first guest that we've ever had on, and we're going to find out how this works. No pressure. There's never another guest. You've got a hell of a record. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about where you are now, and then let's go back to how you got here.
Yeah, sure. So I started off as a kid. My dad was president of the IACC back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I grew up with anti-counterfeiting. He'd always bring stuff home, and I'd see like holograms and all these different things. And he'd bring fakes and reals home and ask us which is which. And so it really fascinated me from when I was a child. I moved over to Germany, lived in Germany for 15 years in Munich, studied in London, business and management. And then my dad and I opened up a company together to work against counterfeiting. He was working at Giesecke and Devrient before, and they wanted to branch out from just doing bank cards and the euro. So that's how we formed our company. And we started off doing a lot of in the fashion industry, and we would do woven tags, and there would be a security tag in there. So usually 2 or 3, depending on the customer. And then I came back to the States 16 years ago and opened up shop. And then shortly after, about 2 years after, my dad passed away. So I took over and did it for another 6 years. And then sold the company to a partner in Germany and got into the RFID world. And then I worked with Deister for 3 years, building the US. Then went over to OPSEC Security and was there for quite some time. And from there, I went to Authentics and was doing the online brand protection. And from there, I went to Systech for a short stint, and now I'm at NovaVision. And NovaVision concentrates on tamper-evident tapes, holograms, and cargo seals.
So let's actually, before we go too far back into your past, let's talk about the issues that you're seeing now, that NovaVision's seeing now around pallet security. What have you seen, and what is your big exciting concern?
Yeah, well, I mean, pallet security, I don't think is brought far enough. When I got to NovaVision, I didn't realize that there is this whole other world of pallet security. And basically what I've seen from customer standpoint is, they do the shrink wrap around the pallets and all the boxes are in there. But the counterfeiters just take the cardboard off the top and dig into the middle, take out the boxes that are in the middle, empty them out, and put the empty boxes back in. And they don't know until it's all unpacked. So this has affected a lot of them. And the bad actors also know exactly where dead spots are along train routes. So they can easily infiltrate those areas and get their products.
And are you saying that there's a dead spot? Is there electronic monitoring of that pallet throughout its journey? What is the thing that they're looking for? The opportunity to
there's some cargo is GPS on it, and in these routes there are some dead spots for GPS. So and they figure that out and they go after that.
Wow.
So let's say you've got a pallet of really expensive medicine and it's got GPS tags on it. So you're waiting until there's a dead spot where the GPS tag cannot report in, and then you're going into the box, pulling out the ingredients, putting them in a Faraday bag of some sort, and then secreting them off. What is the thought process there?
Yeah, that's basically it. No more, no less. I mean, what they do then afterwards with it is several different things, from diluting it and putting it into new medicines, into different medicines, or just finding old packaging and putting the actual medicine in there. but you don't know if it's expired. You don't know what's happened to it in the meantime, if it's been tampered with or anything like that.
For me, this is one of these new kind of schemes that I hadn't been exposed to, which I find really, really fascinating. And I think there's two things with that. One of them is probably cargo theft, right? Which is what you're describing, which is I steal some of the cargo, I never notice it's in there. The second thing that criminals can probably also do with that is they can easily utilize that to create a cover load, right? So go in, take some of the legitimate stuff out, put whatever fake narcotics, you mentioned it, into it, and kind of have this circle of real product around it, might not get inspected. And so that makes the pallet extremely vulnerable. That's really, really interesting.
And the same thing happens with waste. So pharmaceutical waste, if it's going out and not protected, it's easily tampered with, or easily things are stolen out of it. And then we don't know if, the medical waste was actually good stuff or bad stuff, or what could be in there.
Do you remember, Shabir, when we saw this massive case where folks had gotten their hands on genuine bottles of medicines and started to have this massive scheme of counterfeit drugs that they got convicted for in the United States, of cancer drugs? And you and I were thinking about, like, how did they get all of these very genuine bottles, right? This might be one of the sources. It's just, I find a train or a cargo or a freight or a pallet with waste on it, and I basically just, steal that pallet or some of the pallet of waste. And then I can utilize it to create counterfeits.
We've seen that. We've seen HIV empty and full patient buyback schemes here in the States in the last 5 years. And then I actually remember during the pandemic, there were people reselling bottles of both the COVID vaccines online. I actually bought some of them off eBay. The irony being that the time it took me to buy the bottles off eBay so we could do a PSA to vaccinators to please securely dispose of your trash so it doesn't get used in counterfeit vaccine. That didn't take me long to buy the eBay bottles. What took me longer is when my board members insisted that I report it to HHS as a criminal tip. And the forms to actually do that took an easy half an hour for me to report that potential crime.
I read they were doing that in Poland too, but instead of the COVID vaccine, they were putting Botox in there. And I was like, isn't that kind of the same price?
Yeah, I guess it didn't occur to me until now that wrapping a pallet in plastic is only something you can do horizontally. That is difficult to do, I guess, vertically, because you're going to cover up the place where the forklift actually picks up the pallet, and so it's not secure.
Right, but that's why they put the straps on, and typically they'll just do the two over, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this makes
you just slide the strap off,
right? Exactly, and slide it back on. I mean, that's why this top clip, right, like goes in the middle, and it's crinched in or clamped in, and you have 4 straps going down on the 4 sides. And then you can go take it a step further and then put some TE tape over that. And so then you can really see if it has been moved, or like you said, just slid right off, because that tape would say it's void or opened.
So that's the NovaVision solution to the problem is tamper-evident tape, and then this additional device that goes on top.
Right. So the device, the top clip itself, is the one security. To have it layered a little bit and to bring it a little bit further in the security would be putting the TE tape over those bands. So it's just another extra step to take to make sure.
What would be fascinating is actually, I would have loved to have had you on a guest. Remember, Shabir, when we covered the story of the massive cargo fraud out in Long Beach? You would have liked that, Stephan. So it was a large organized cargo fraud where they took cargo containers that were flagged for secondary inspections. And as they're being flagged for secondary inspections, those transporters drove it to a completely different warehouse before it actually went to the secondary inspection spot. Those containers had counterfeit in them. They emptied them, refilled them up, and then delivered them to customs. And to do this, they faked, or they produced counterfeit and fake container locks, right? The ones that seal containers, and had done that rather successfully until customs figured out they're like, hey, these locks don't look right, started a huge investigation and took a massive counterfeit ring out that operated for over a year in Long Beach. And they had counterfeited the container locks. So would have loved to get your opinion on that, because I was like, wow, what does it take to counterfeit a lock like that? So I thought it was really interesting.
A lot. It does take a lot. I mean, like anything in counterfeiting or anti-counterfeiting, there's no golden ticket. There's no one solution fits all. There's no, this is going to stop everything. And somebody will always figure out a way. I mean, if it's RFID, they take a knife to it and cut the antenna. If it's, a label like that, they'll take it off and see if they can mimic and put another label over it that looks very similar.
So is that a technique that you've seen? That's actually the first I've heard of it. Are people carefully cutting RFID chip antennas in order to prevent detection?
Yeah, they're doing it a lot. And it's messing up with inventory and so many other things. The whole supply chain relies on an RFID tag, for instance. And if you just cut it midway, all of a sudden they've lost their product and they don't know where it is. And then it falls off the back of the truck.
And yeah, they only know at the point at which they re-poll all the product, right? So if you don't do that often enough, you don't actually have an easy place to begin your investigation as to where the shrinkage happened.
Right. Yeah.
Can you think of an example without telling us the name of the brand where you've seen RFID chip antennas get cut?
Yeah. Okay. So they are leading online and physical retailer, and they noticed that, none of their RFID tags were working when they tried to read them.
Interesting.
And this also was an issue with so when you order online from this company, typically all the online stuff comes out of one destination or two, depending on where you are in America. And what they had to do is they had to start shipping it from the local stores in order to get there on time, because they couldn't figure out where these things were going. And so it messed up all internally, records, ERP systems, et cetera.
Have you seen this also in sort of a shoplifting context? Have you seen people who are dependent upon the RFID chip to prevent product from walking out the door without being paid, learning how to cut the antenna so that it's also easily stolen?
I mean, I'm sure it happens. I don't know, so I'm not, everybody always asks me about shoplifting with anti-counterfeiting. I'm like, well, it's kind of a different vertical. And with the thing is with RFID tags nowadays, that they are so thin that you can't see them at all. So you don't know where they are in the packaging.
Yeah. Yeah, I've experienced that with books, right? They'll embed one in a book, and I will not realize that it's got one until I take it home. What's this weird lump?
They're in shoes too, like in the sole of the shoes. A lot of companies actually do that.
Oh, interesting.
And mainly for inventory reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating. So you've had a really interesting, long and storied career. Can you think of a time when the counterfeiters didn't realize who you were and started marketing their fake products to you?
So it's funny that you say that, because we, when we first started with Joel, with my dad and I, and we were in the fashion area, the woven tags that we were making, they wanted them originally all in UV with UV inks inside of it. Mm-hmm. And so we did that, but we also added IR into there, and they didn't know that. So we did that for a couple of months and then showed them afterwards, and were able to go into stores and actually see that here are the UV ones and here are ones with UV and IR. And they were so blown away by it, they just wanted to do everything like that.
That's fascinating.
Cool. We also do like overlays for IDs and things like that. And we had a customer reach out to us and say, hey, can you do the Virginia state outline on an overlay for an ID card and send me a couple hundred? And we were like, well, we don't know who you are, first off. And then we contacted the Virginia state authorities and asked them, like, okay, are you guys now using this outline of Virginia still on your on your overlays for your IDs. And they're like, well, the old ones, yes, but not the new ones. And within a half hour, we got calls from the FBI, from DC, from everybody. And we asked them, we're like, so what do we do? And they're like, well, go ahead with it. And we went ahead with it. And sure enough, they made a sting operation out of it and busted the guy.
Nice.
I hadn't actually thought about anti-counterfeiting vendors getting fooled by counterfeiters, but obviously that is really a professional hazard for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of vetting that goes into it. I remember, like at OPSEC, they have a credit card company, and so the company itself doesn't call in. It's all the vendors of that credit card company that if they're doing like the Ravens or if they're doing the Broncos or whatever it is, a credit card, they call you and they say, hey, I need 200 or 2,000 of these holograms. And it's like, okay, who are you? Let's go through the vetting process first. It's a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had much interaction with other counterfeiters in the sports apparel? I imagine there's a lot of work that you've done given your woven tag techniques in the sports apparel. Have counterfeiters come to you in that space as well?
Yeah. The thing is that, to be able to get a hold of these security taggants, you as a company go through a lot of vetting in order to get the security approval, et cetera. And, it's not something that you can or want to advertise, but you want to be able to say, hey, I'm ISO whatever certified. And counterfeiters see that and they're like, okay, maybe I can pull a fast one. Here's my Gmail account. You're like,
immediate red flag.
Yeah.
No, it's always fascinating with covert features. So I'm a huge fan of covert features. If you listen to our podcast at all, covert features for me are it, because any overt feature, as you talked about, right, it can be replicated, can be made look closely enough, or I find a secondary supplier that makes it look very similar. And so I'm a huge fan of covert features. And as you said, the secrecy to it, like companies I work with and previous company I worked for, when we had covert features on, and you're right, folks come there like, oh, can you tell us your covert features? And you're like, no, there's like 5 people in the company that know all the features, and absolutely not. Like some of them were so highly secretly guarded. And to your point, like the taggant, right? That's a specially formulated. I'm not just passing this out to anybody. Where vendors came, they're like, oh, can we use the taggant so we can co-produce it? We're like, no, you can't. So it's always very funny when folks think it's just a simple thing to share.
Yeah, but with one customer, they were desperate for a brand protection security feature. And, that it doesn't happen that often that they're like, oh, let's do this quickly. Because typically in this world, it's anywhere from 12 months to 2 years, basically, a deal could take to process, because there's a lot that you go through from the production line, from implementation, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And this one company that came to us, we did it. We wrapped it up in about 6 months, and it went on to fuse boxes like this. And right in there, in the logo, it would be printed in there. And this was IR. So IR burns first at 1500 degrees Celsius. And so a house fire typically, is around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, between 800 and 1,000. 1,500 degrees, I think, is 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, which is space shuttle reentry temperatures. So it can withstand a lot. And within the first 3 months after the implementation, they figured out very, very quickly where their counterfeits were coming from, mostly Turkey, and were able to shut down those supply lines, et cetera.
Wow. Well, and it's awful to think about, but looking after the fact at a house fire and tracing it to a fuse or a circuit breaker that was counterfeit, right? To have your anti-counterfeiting marks be able to survive the heat of a house fire so that you could actually pinpoint that item as the cause. It's sort of a terrible situation, but it's also kind of great.
Yeah, it's a liability issue at the same time. So they can, and since IR is used in currencies, it holds up in a court of law automatically. And they can go in there to the house fire afterwards and be able to use a small laser and detect it and say, okay, yeah, this was ours or this wasn't ours.
Wow.
Sven was particularly enamored with a story about the Canadian government revealing all of their secretive features on their currency in a previous press release a couple of months ago. When you go into this, do you have a conversation up front with a client where you say, okay, this is a covert security feature? Like, what exactly is the size of the cone of silence that's going to learn about it? Like, do you help them plan that? Because you can imagine there's people who need to know, and then there's people who want to know, and there's people who other people think they need to know, but they don't really. Like, how do you guide clients through that process?
There's several ways. Like one of them with this fuse box company, we had to have a safe on site that only 2 people would have the key to, and it had to have a 2-key entrance at the same time. So both keys had, just like a lockbox at a bank, and that way they could get the IR powder that were individually wrapped in a certain amount to mix in with the ink. Because IR is extremely heavy and it sinks in ink. So you have to do it fresh all the time. So it's a little bit more labor intensive, but at the same time, you're only doing it once for every time you put in that ink. So it's not like a lot more work. It's just there's a tiny, like, add this powder to that ink and call it a day. But there's a lot of these different security procedures that you do find and go through.
Obviously, people who work in products that have anti-counterfeiting features on them all worry about something that I first learned about in Chinese manufacturing, which is the gray shift, right? Like, you've got the whole production line set up. It's designed to affix the covert security features. And then everybody goes home for the day, and one or more corrupt employees stay and decide to run an extra production run with all of your security features, and then secrete the now covert security marked product out. Have you seen a lot of that? And I guess the safe with the 2 keys is sort of part of how you address the security of the manufacturing line.
Yeah, like for instance, with the woven labels, we would have the company that's making the woven labels send us a roll. And usually this would be like at a 75 detox. And so the 75 detox is the width of the thread. And we would put it down to like a 73 and then coat it with a silicone wax sealant. And then it would come back to 75. And then we would send it back to the manufacturer of the label. And we would say, this goes in the A in the word. And that was the easiest way to do it, and they wouldn't know what was in there. But when you're approaching a customer, some customers want all the bells and whistles, and I advise them not to. As much as you want to sell that as a company to make more profits, you're going to lose that customer quickly, because counterfeiters are going to figure out all those different security layers eventually. So I've always found the best way is start with a couple, and then you can always add on later. And that way, when you're adding on later, you can also say, okay, this was from last year, or this was from 2 years ago. And you can always detect to see, which products you have, and are they really the newest, or are they old?
So in your mind, when you're helping a client think long-term about covert security features, you're thinking of a life cycle where features may cycle in and out, and it allows you to never have one single technique that a counterfeiter can learn to thwart you, but to always be changing and to be able to use that to identify at a moment in time what was the right feature.
Keep them dancing.
It's funny that you just said that, because and I said, Shabir, when I looked over your kind of CV and where you came from, I'm like, I must have run into you at multiple conferences, like TechStem Forum, all of those kind of things. The companies you worked for, I'm guaranteed you and I have crossed paths. And I always find it interesting that, and your philosophy makes a lot of sense. And I always found it interesting that certain security providers, none of the companies you work for, they want to sell all of it, right? So when they want to give you, they're like, here's all the 50 features I can put in there. And the example I gave, and I wrote an article about it a long time ago, where like, it's like when you go car shopping, you don't need the car with everything in it. You don't need the massive Hummer with you don't need everything the car can possibly have if you're a soccer mom that just tries to go to the mall, right? You need a minivan. Figure out what you need and get the features you need. And then to your point, recycle them, change them so they adapt. And I always found it interesting when people just load all these features in, also make these security devices extremely expensive at that point. And you're like, why do it that way? Be small, be nimble, do one, keep adjusting. So I love your philosophy on that.
Right. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they're like, why are we spending so much money on this? And what's the ROI? And you're like, well, I advise you not to do this, but.
What do you think of the current? So this is one of the, we have two things that keep coming up when we cover the news and we talk about counterfeits. The first of which is my obsession with counterfeit U.S. postal stamps. It is unbelievable just how badly it seems that people are fleecing the U.S. Postal Service today for stamps. And I actually can't tell if there's any covert features on them at all. If they are, they're not working very well. And certainly we haven't been told as the public about any one feature. Have you noticed, been watching the postal stamp counterfeiting problem?
I have not. I mean, it doesn't shock me at all. The part of it, their systems are very old, and they're not it's not a privately held company. It's a service. So for them, it's trying to get to that medicine to that person that lives all the way out in that dirt road in Wyoming.
Yeah, I think I mailed Sven a handful of stamps and letters with different real and fake stamps on them. They all arrived, and someone had told Sven that, there were some security features that will be detected during in transit, but they appear to have not been telling the truth or were misinformed because everything arrived just fine.
Yeah, so Shabir mailed them to me, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So I'm going to get a letter with a controlled delivery by some, 3-letter federal agency that figured out that I'm part of some counterfeiting ring that's mailing stamps around. The funny side note actually was when I heard from some of my sources that there are security features, the counterfeit stamp actually arrived first at my house, which was very funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you right now go on Google, it's my secret obsession. Just type in cheap US forever stamps, and you will find stamps where an entire banderole of stamps is like $24, which means each stamp is like 24 cents. Stamps are 75 cents right now. They have never been 24 cents. So, and it's everywhere.
I just put a UV light up to these stamps and I don't see anything.
I know.
Yeah, I don't think there's any security features.
No. And I pulled my big microscope out and I looked for like some microprint I could find. Nothing. I didn't see anything on it.
There's probably been this conversation amongst Postal Service, anti-counterfeiting team and security team about exactly what it's going to cost to add covert features to forever stamps. And I know they probably had the conversation about how it's just going to make the stamps more expensive, but they routinely raise the price of forever stamps to account for costs. I think they should bury a covert feature cost in the next increase of forever stamps. They're getting fleeced. Right? Then people are just eating their lunch, and it's not as if the Postal Service can afford that.
Right. I mean, the way it's all moving is, onto a blockchain, and it's the easiest way to track basically anything.
So for the rolls of stamps that everybody buys, if the Postal Service were to come to you tomorrow and say, like, I have this roll of stamps, I'm pretty sure this is the real one. Actually, I think I put away and sealed away the counterfeit one. If the Postal Service came to you and said, Stephan, what do? We need to continue selling rolls of stamps. We can't make it more complicated because many people can't operate printers or anything else, and they have no idea what the blockchain is. How would you tell the Postal Service to secure a roll of stamps that's sold today?
Multi-layered security features. I mean, all I can see from these stamps is basically the way that it's cut around the edges. And that might be what throws off or triggers the machine to say this is real or this is not real, that there's a certain spacing between those because they all kind of seem very, very equal. Yeah, I would just do multi-layered security approach. You'd start off with UV. It is the cheapest security tagging out there. And then throw in IR. I mean, you have expensive stamps too that you could have multi-layered for the different levels of payment that you're doing.
Yeah, so the $2 stamp gets maybe a more expensive feature to implement than the 75-cent stamp.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you could put a tag in the glue. You could put all kinds of, if you want to, but you can put a microprint on it. Also not expensive to do, and only the folks that know it's there.
Yeah, with digital printing now, I mean, you could do so much.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about steganographically embedding information in the cut from the around the edge of the stamp, but it's entirely possible. You're absolutely right, and that is super clever. Our other obsession right now is counterfeit money, but it seems as if, I don't know if it's just because we're looking for it, so we're seeing it more often, but I'm just seeing story after story of people passing fake money. But a lot of it's just ridiculous. Like they're not looking carefully enough at bills that say for theatrical use only and things like that. And people are just taking them and not thinking very hard. I don't think you need any counterfeiting features for that. You just need to be paying attention.
Well, that's hard nowadays with everybody watching YouTube shorts and so forth. I think our attention span has gone down dramatically. As for money being counterfeited, it's, counterfeiting, I think, is the second oldest profession in the world. And it started off with the Romans when they were in England. They wanted their Italian wine, but it was too far to ship it. So they would take the old Italian bottles and fill them up with French wine and then send them over.
Yeah.
And so they were doing it to themselves, basically. And that's kind of, money is still one of those things that everybody uses it and has it, but we've gone far too far over with using just credit cards, and those alone, the skimming machines that are on credit card machines. I mean, that's another thing that, for instance, NovaVision does is we put we do those little red tapes that go over the Sunoco's and so forth at the gas stations that say, hey, this has been checked. There's no skimmer on it. There's a red tape here. So to give you an idea, the consumer, that you feel safe and you can use your card. I think that the hardest part of this entire thing of counterfeiting is basically educating the public and getting the public to understand. Because if one person says, oh, hey, that is a really cool Louis Vuitton bag, I'd love one too. And they get it. Like, there was just a court case where the manufacturer won against Louis Vuitton, where he would take Louis Vuitton bags, cut them up, and make his own bags out of them, and then resell them. And this is considered art. So it's taking a material. It's not a design trademark. It is, it is art. He's made his own product out of something else. So it's recycled. It's going with this whole eco flow. And at the same time, Louis Vuitton got really, really upset. So they sued and he won.
Interesting. It's funny when you say about communicating to the public. That was the story I was obsessed with the Canadians. So, and we can find the YouTube and send it to you, or you can look on a previous episode. The Canadian banknote company, when they rolled out their new bill, did a YouTube, and it wasn't a short, it's like a 15-minute thing, where they accept the covert features. They go through every feature that's on that bill, like in detail. Here's exactly where I hold it. That's where the print shows up. And just so in detail. And we brought it because then a couple of weeks later, there was this surge in Canadian counterfeit money. And you're like, well, you gave him a partial manual with the exception of the covert features.
Right.
The criminals now, hold on, let me take notes. I got it. Wait, I thought it was so funny. So that's always the fun. That's what I always find when we try to inform the public. What do you share with them so they could authenticate it without giving away the secret sauce where the criminals say, oh, cool, I just counterfeit that. So it's a really interesting balance always to find.
I think Heinz did a great job with their bottles. The red on the bottle is supposed to match the red in the ketchup. So in restaurants, typically, you'll have a Heinz bottle there, but they'll fill it up with a different kind of ketchup and it'll be a different red. And so the label has to match the same red as the ketchup.
I didn't know that.
I have been in restaurants and watched the waitress refilling the ketchup bottle from like a Lasco container and thinking to myself, that was Heinz at one point, but it's not Heinz anymore. You know, the story about the person who cuts up the real bags and makes their own reminds me of one of the most famous currency artists of all time, JSG Boggs, who used to hand draw bills that looked just like, let's say, $100 US bill, and then attempt to pay for it, but tell the person in advance, this is a piece of art. I would like you to exchange it as if it was $100 bill, but it is not. And Boggs did get in trouble with the law in at least 3 countries that I know of, and probably more, because his art was continent spanning in his proliferation.
My mom used to she was a fantastic artist. She would write everything calligraphy, and she would buy white t-shirts and she would draw the logos and everything on there because she didn't want to buy them because they were too expensive. And so my dad is sitting there going, why are you doing this? I work against this.
It's like having a member of my family get involved in counterfeit medicine. Wait a second, repudiating my entire career. Well, tell me, what is the one technique that you've seen lately that just makes you go, that is some clever criminality that is going to have to be dealt with in the future?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, anything from pharmaceutical. I mean, the whole, that AIDS drug, which you guys mentioned in the beginning, that whole story is fascinating. How they would buy back the empty bottles and then just rub them off, the expiration dates off, and put in a placebo or whatever it was in there. Sometimes it was Advil, I think. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating because this guy was really using the streets and worked the entire street and knew exactly what he was doing and how effective it was. That to me was impressive from the bad side, from the bad actor. But at the same time, it's like, this is how we're not being diligent enough with our products and our stuff. I mean, if we just have, a pill bottle laying around, people will just rip it off and put whatever they want. They can make their own sticker. It's just a sticker.
Yeah, there's been a proposal that I've seen a number of folks make that because these bottles get bought back from folks who are on public assistance programs like Medicaid, I've seen a proposal to actually have Medicaid medicines put in different bottles, like a specific kind of bottle, so that the packaging itself is not resellable. Because you would know that if it's this certain color red bottle, it's never to be resold. It's never to be, you're never to see it from a wholesaler. That move has not made a lot of headway yet, but I'm confident that the criminals would figure out how to make that color bottle.
I feel like it's shifting more to injectables than pills. Like, so they're just trying to move, so you don't have these bottles and so forth. It's just an old syringe that you can, you inject it into, you put it into a cup or you put it into your mouth, and that's that. And you throw the syringe away.
Yeah, it's interesting. At PSM, we follow the regulatory and legal restrictions on purchasing and selling pill presses quite a bit, right? Which in the hands of the wrong person, a pill press is basically like a DVD burner. It's a counterfeit machine. And what people don't think about is that when you sell sterile injectables, they're sold in a vial that is capped by a vial capping machine. No one treats vial capping machines the same way as they treat pill presses, but they're absolutely critical in the process of making illegal sterile injectables, counterfeit sterile injectables. And so I think that is going to be, at some point, we're going to realize that is to be added to the list of machines that need to be controlled, but it's not there today.
Well, if you can find it on eBay, then they figured out, what was it, 4 years ago, 4 years or 5, that they needed to stop selling the pill presses because that's where people were buying them.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of these markets that are shaping up and things are getting better, I think, on their side. They've really invested money and they're working hard with brand owners, with brand protection companies to be able to, because it hurts them too. It deters the customers from wanting to reorder. It's a whole thing. I mean, I've purchased myself counterfeits, not knowing. Like, I remember in college when, didn't have two nickels to rub together, I went to the aisle that sold everything for £1 or below. And there was some some body wash there that I got, and I took a shower the next day, and my entire body broke out in a rash. And this was a body wash that I had used previously, so I was like, okay, I know what this is, and I feel comfortable with this. And now I will never buy that brand again, just because I don't feel comfortable anymore.
Yeah, even the experts get suckered.
Yeah, just to close it out, I love your perspective on things. What Shabir and I like to do is to do predictions when we kind of see things moving. We're like, hey, we think that's going to be, a big illicit trade illicit trade trend in the future. So I'm going to ask you, when you kind of look at what you see, what's a illicit trade trend that you're seeing or predicting that brand owners and rights holders should get ready for, that they're currently potentially underestimating?
I mean, like before, and I think this is always something that happens, is diversion. Mostly, I think diversion is one of the least talked about, but most just as detriment as counterfeiting, because you have expired things, you have things that might have something added to it, you just don't know. And everybody talks about AI and how that is affecting everything, and it is right now. But that will curve around again, I think, because we'll figure out some way of, putting a digital watermark on something that's online, to putting a better brand protection security feature to the product. But I think for reasons of supply chain, which I think the public doesn't really understand, and sometimes companies don't understand it themselves. But when you get all of the people together to talk about it, they're like, "Oh, we didn't realize that was part of your problem." And I think diversion is one of the biggest issues, and that needs to be kind of honed in, because you get all of a sudden MAP pricing is all over the board, and things you've got counterfeits that people are buying for a lot cheaper. And the real ones are losing money on this, so they're raising the price to make their margins match again, and it falls apart. So yeah, diversion for me is one of the biggest. I know that we used to deal with a shampoo company that they would only sell to barbers. There are three different kinds of shampoos that they would just sell to barbers, and the barbers would get them, and then they'd sell them to Walgreens or CVS, and you'd see them in the store for $3-4 more than what they typically cost.
Yeah, we've seen that in pharmaceuticals. Actually, we've seen lidocaine is one that we actually did a trace of. I had a pharmacist in West Virginia ask me why the lidocaine that he had to, which was in short supply, that he had to buy from a gray marketer, was so expensive, and where it came from. We used the Drug Supply Chain Security Act to trace it back to a small pharmacy in Texas that would never use the lidocaine or dispense it, because it's a sterile injectable, usually administered in a doctor's office or in a hospital. Whenever there was an allocation available from the prime wholesaler, they would buy it and immediately flip it to a gray marketer, which is how they were exacerbating the shortage, because they were part of the problem at that point.
Well, the e-sutures company that got 6 months jail, and that was it. And they, this story, it's quite famous, of the Johnson & Johnson e-sutures, where they found it was over $1 million worth of fake sutures, in Turkey. But this company in Florida called e-sutures was selling them online and getting away with it. And it wasn't until a doctor noticed that something was wrong with it and put it off to the side and got another one and sent it back to J&J. And they're like, yeah, this is counterfeit. And they went after e-sutures for selling them, and they got a slap on the wrist. And I think that, again, drug dealers are moving from dealing drugs to selling counterfeits, because it's the same profit margin. It's just you don't get as much of a sentence.
Yeah.
Shockingly, I think that story about e-sutures is partly due to the hard work of our friend Jeffrey Potter, who's an old friend of ours at Patterson Belknap, and he's a counterfeit fighter extraordinaire. It's super fun to listen to him talk about publicly.
He was even behind The AIDS one, the AIDS medication, when he was presenting that, it was like watching a Hollywood movie in real time in a presentation. I was just captivated by it.
Well, thank you, Stephan, for being on the podcast, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Tell us where people can find your company's various products and tamper-resistant tools.
Yeah, sure. So we're on NovaVisionInc.com. You can see us online. The issue is that we have so many things on there. It's kind of hard to navigate through. It's its own world of, it's its own Amazon, basically. But if you need to talk to me, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone regarding any of our products. You can email me at svonschilcher@NovaVisionInc.com. And thank you very much, Reader and Sven, for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner. Podcast production by Anna Rowland, management by Sarah Ember Safdar, and theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.